Hey everyone, and welcome to the Pokemon Champions League Season 11 Power Rankings. This is Paluki, and I have here with me Sam.
Hi, I am indeed Sam.
So Sam and I have put together some rankings, and in this video we're going to be discussing PCL Generations League. Sam, what are your thoughts on how Gens did this season?
I was a little bit more involved with Gens. I followed the draft a little bit more closely. I had a friend leaving picks with me. I'm generally interested in how things turned out. I think that there's an interesting kind of disparity in teams. There are a couple really good teams. There's a couple teams that I'm personally not as big a fan of, but I think that every team has good pieces.
Yeah. No, I absolutely
Certainly,
agree with that.
yeah, certainly no team is out of the running from the get-go, and certainly like our judgments of the teams are not at all final.
I wasn't I wasn't not happy about Origins, but for some reason, like looking over a lot of the teams in Gens actually did really well, and some did far better than teams in Origins, and we'll have a separate video on that. But let's go ahead and kick it off here with we're gonna start with number 16 and work our way up to number 1. And so the first team we have here is the Boston Celebies, and the coach is No Shoes. Sam, you want to talk about No Shoes team? Go ahead.
I kick this off. I have always, to a degree, been a critic of Finney, and I've had to kind of come to a reckoning with that recently, where I've kind of started to feel like, hey, maybe it's not as horrible as it used to be, or anything like that. I still am not keen on it being like the first pick. I think that there are like a lot of successful teams have picked Finney recently in like bigger leagues and like bigger scenes. But like you say, it is like a second rounder almost consistently, and I don't really get why it's there with like Venusaur. There's a couple other things that I don't really understand why they're paired with Finney. Umbreon really needs Toxic to function.
Right.
Bronzong doesn't need Toxic, but it benefits from it. There are, of course, good pieces. Infernape is a good Draftmon. I'm still confused as to why there's a Torkoal. But those are my like thoughts in a minute. What do you think?
Yeah. So I just to respond to a few things that you mentioned. So the first thing I noticed when I saw this team is that Finney just doesn't fit. And what I couldn't really decide in my mind is whether this is a Finney team that didn't support around, or whether this is a team that works or functions on its own, and you could just swap out Finney for like Primarina and bring something else up a little bit, and it would be a fine team. I agree. Umbreon does not function under Finney's terrain. It really does need Toxic to do what it's doing. Otherwise, you're just kind of soaking ghost hits or psychic hits for Venusaur, throwing up wishes and moving on, which is fine. But I mean, if you want to do anything beyond passivity, you have to set a Toxic. Venusaur, the hard thing for me with Finney and Venusaur is like in a lot of ways it makes sense because Venusaur does not want to be burned, and unfortunately, like when you build a Mega Venusaur team, you're kind of expecting that it will take a Scald every once in a while. And that's just a fact that you kind of have to deal with. And Finney's actually great at taking those Scalds and preventing Venusaur from getting burned. But the problem is also when you have a Mega Venusaur team, you're often clicking Sludge Bomb, hoping to get a poison on something so that you can just stall it out or at least get a lot of chip on it. Getting that poison plus a Leech Seed up with Mega Venusaur is really devastating. And if you take away a part of that, you're kind of ruining the opportunity that Venusaur has to, do what it does best. Torkoal makes sense to me, just as a cheeky non-Mega Venusaur Chlorophyll Sweeper option. And I actually...
That was my thought as well, yeah.
So I actually consider that myself with 6.9 Tails, which is Scorching Sands now. It's really fun. Seems like a nice little option. Torkoal's, another one that sets the sun. Shoes probably realized that they could use some removal and maybe take some pressure off of Finney to do that. I don't know. But, and then there's other kind of like sun abusers here, I guess. You do have Lisk, who can use the sun for sure. And definitely Infernape would do some good work under the sun. But it does kind of feel like the team is doing a few different things, and Finney just doesn't fit any of those things.
Yeah. And ultimately, I like my last word on this is that I generally don't feel good about teams that don't bring something that applies a lot of offensive pressure or is very versatile in the first like two picks.
Totally agree.
And this team is very much a case of that. Like Fini and Mega Venusaur, not offensive threats, really.
Yeah, there's not a lot of special breaking going on here in general.
Yeah. But regardless, it just felt a little bit disjointed to me. Um, and maybe it'll outperform. Like shoes his teams. Like he'll pick up some wins for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So let's move on here then to Thoro, the Jersey City Jellicent.
Mm.
So
Do
first
you want to start
thoughts.
this one?
Sure, yeah, I will. So I actually had a lot of conversation with Thoro while he was drafting this team, and there were definitely moments where uh, the kind of conversation that he and I were having were like, this Pokemon seems really fun to use in draft. So you see things like Obstagoon, you see things like Galar stuff like Stakataka, where it was mostly me and him in DMs going like, "Oh, that's super hype. You should try it. We should try it."
Mhm.
I do think that Stakataka and Rillaboom have some nice synergy going on there. I love Obstagoon on any team, to be honest. I do think this team struggles a little bit with checking fighting types, and so there's a bit of an issue there when you've got Darm, you've got Goon, you've got Stakataka, you've got basically
Mm.
the things that are scariest on this team, not named Rillaboom, are like just inviting a Mach Punch, and so you're putting pressure on Gardevoir, and then that's going to be, that's going to put Gardevoir on the back foot because very often Gardevoir kind of functions like a bulky offensive mon that it wants some of that HP so it can take a hit and dish it back and get at least one
Sure.
kill.
Yeah.
Mantine is a weird Pokemon that I've never really been comfortable with in draft. It's certainly less passive than it used to be, given that it has Hurricane and stuff
Mm.
now. Um, but I don't know. It's always felt a little bit weird to me. Overall, the one thing I do like about this team is that every Pokemon I think could come to a match. Even Karkle has some like weird niche opportunity to come to a match, but at least Girder
Mm.
up can come to a match. And I
Yeah.
always love Rillaboom. Rillaboom is a really fun mon. I used it in season 9, and I know personally from having built with it and having just seen how opponents build against Rillaboom. Despite there being obvious checks, it's still very threatening, and it can pivot. You can see a situation in which Rillaboom U-turns on a flying type into Darm, who can then just wreak havoc.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I will say, like, in conversations I've had with people before, I feel like I underrated Rillaboom like early in the generation. It's just kind of I wasn't completely sold on it. I think it's better than I gave it credit for early. But I think the other thing to say about this team is that like I think I kind of pushed hard on this being like I'm not really so sure about this in a draft format. I think you said Mantine is an interesting Pokemon, which in my opinion is like you're being nice about
It's
it.
generous.
I would say it's a bad Pokemon, and I would
Okay,
say it's a bad Pokemon on teams like this because it is a momentum sponge. It gives
that's
up
fair.
momentum by coming in. It doesn't check all that much for like a bulky water, and you can argue that it's like oh, it's a fighting resist on a team that needs a fighting resist. Another issue for this team that didn't come up that this is be the last thing I say is that the fairy resists, in my opinion, are suspect. Stack attack is not a good
Hmm.
like it's not a defensive steal at all. Stack attack is interesting, but it's not gonna like take repeated moon blasts for you, for instance.
Yep.
So you're talking about Gengar, Stack Attack, and Karkul as your fairy resists, and that's the best type in the game right there.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and that
yeah.
kind of summarizes my opinion of this team. I think that if momentum is kept up, this team has so much offensive opportunity, and a lot of those weirder Pokemon like Stakataka that don't fit a traditional role could actually do really well. But then when you have something like Mantine,
Hmm.
soaking that momentum and kind of preventing you from keeping that opportunity in check, then yeah, you're gonna sort of
Yeah.
you're gonna have to start playing very aggressively. You're gonna lose an important piece, and then things are
Mhm.
gonna get really difficult. So
And
no,
yeah, I ultimately
absolutely.
agree with that assessment. Is that it's basically like I like a lot of the offensive pieces on the team. Like, there's a lot of good Pokemon here. It's just like it's yeah, I think like they're yeah, like I said, the pieces are there. It's a question of can they keep momentum, and I think that with the way it's built right now, that'll be hard, but it could be doable. It just means playing a lot more aggressively.
Yeah, this team's going to be dependent on play style, so we'll see how Thor does with it. So let's move on here to, I think this is going to be Brian with the Crystal Base Staryu. Do you want to take this one first?
Sure. I let's see. I mean, I think that like Brian and I had a conversation about like the first pick Heatran. I don't think Heatran's a first round mon. There are a couple pieces there that that followed that were interesting to me. Necro is a mon that I like. I don't want to say it's underrated in draft. I think people like kind of appreciate what it can do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's maybe even a little bit underutilized right now. So I could see that doing well.
Oh, yeah.
Mega Lopunny, it's not bad in the current generation. It's not, it misses return, but like I guess it's like it helps his speed a lot.
Right.
Um, I'm a I'm a little bit confused by like both Slurpuff and Grimmsnarl on the same team. I think they're both really middling fairies, and like two middling fairies doesn't add up to a good one.
Yep.
But and then, from there, like there are still good pieces. Like I said, I think the ones that I like most on the team are things like Rhyperior and Necrozma. Um, Jellicent's not bad. But I think Brian also said that like his goal with this team was like to have fun with it. And that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are pieces that like can do interesting things. I think people are like innovating a little bit with like Ments in ways that are kind of cool now.
Yeah.
Like figuring out ways to make it useful. And it's very hit or miss, and honestly, it's kind of very matchup fishy. But
Yep.
uh, by which I mean, you're looking for matchups where like they have a bad fairy.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Or they don't have
but
like a strong Ice Shard response or something like that.
mhm, yeah, yeah, but like Salmon's got interesting pieces. It's like because like it got Hurricane, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
not like tripping here. It
Yeah,
got
it
Hurricane.
got Hurricane. It got so it can run special side. It got dual wing beat as well, so it can set up in the same way that like Dragonite does this gen. Albeit probably a little bit harder to
Mhm.
do, but just saying,
Yeah.
So my 2 cents on this: I originally drafted Heatran Ments, and
Hmm.
I didn't even know that Brian did. Um, I think they're fantastic together. I've laddered with them a little bit together. They're a lot of fun. There's a lot of mind games that go into it, and anytime there's a sort of 50-50 question and you're using Heatran or you have Heatran out, you can do a lot of work with it because it can just click Magma Storm and trap something in, and then now you're taking away an important piece of the six on the other side. So these two are, like, in my opinion, really fun. I agree. Salamence is its success is a little bit contingent on how creative you can be with it because it is not the DD and win kind of mon. It can get there
No,
after a lot
no,
of
I agree.
chip. And part of the reason why I like it with Heatran is because Heatran can chip with Magma Storm on just like random mons on the other side that want to come in, and then Ments can maybe get a DD off and win that game. I think in most cases you'll be doing that with Intimidate so that you can get that DD up rather than Moxie to snowball. But I
Mhm.
do think they're going to be fun together. I would love to see what Brian does with these. 100% agree with you on Necrozma. I think it's I don't have as much experience as you do in the format generally, but like I don't see a lot of Necrozma. I think part of that is because people don't always prioritize a psychic type on higher tiers. People are like they just love Dragon Fairy Steel or Firewater Grass up top, and they don't really focus on that. And if they do focus outside of that, it's like a Mega Pokemon or something. It just seems to be
Mhm.
what most people do. Necrozma is really cool. It can be defensive, it can be offensive, it can be special. It's got Dragon Dance. It's got a
Mhm.
lot of really cool options. And I've been meaning to draft it. I've really wanted to, and every time I face it, I'm terrified. And the thing that makes me most terrified of Necrozma is clicking U-turn onto a weakness policy because I've been swept by it like 3 times. So
Mhm.
I love that. I love Superior and Lopunny for the speed tiers. I personally am a big Superior fan. I also am totally against the naysayers of Lopunny. I think this gen losing return is a problem for sure, but it does not destroy the mon, and it's not a reason to look the other way. I think it dropped a point, and I think that that's
Mhm.
fair.
I mean, yeah, I would kind of agree with that.
Yeah. It's still really good, and the benefit that it got, that being not being able to be intimidated, is amazing.
Mhm.
Getting triple axle and U turn, and I think play rough, all really really nice pieces.
I'm not sure
So
that it got player ref, but I could be wrong.
uh,
I'll check that real quick, but you keep
yeah,
going.
check that. I kind of thought that it did. If it didn't, then I apologize. But it got CC, which is
Yeah, I got close.
that's
Oh no,
nice.
it totally did get player ref. I
It
was
did
just
get play
yeah,
rough. Okay, I was
I've
gonna
never seen
say.
it run, but yeah, that's
So
interesting.
I think I
Oh,
ran it in another league. I had Lopunny in Gen 8, but it was a legacy league.
yeah,
It was Queen's League, and
sure.
funny enough,
Mhm.
I didn't run return that often, and so that's why I thought like, okay, losing return was not that big of a deal.
Mm,
So on the fairies, I totally agree. I think Grimmsnarl is cool. I think it's fun. I think Screen's Grimmsnarl can support this team really well. Um, but the double fairy thing is kind of weird. I think Brian drafted Slurpuff and then realized that he needed a dark. And then he took
yeah.
Grimmsnarl, and then he talked about dropping Slurpuff, and he said, and he even said this, I think, exactly in chat. He said, I thought about dropping Slurpuff, but Slurpuff plus screens just seems really fun. And that's kind of where he started saying, you know what, I'm just trying to have fun with this draft, so I'm going to do that. I agree with the lower pieces. Jellicent Rhyperior is great. I don't know if Haunter is
Yeah,
necessary, and Luxray's a flying resist behind
yeah, no,
him.
I would agree with that. Like interestingly, technically no grounded poison on the team as well, which is a little bit like not great for Necro and Serp and stuff.
Right, right.
The thing is, like, kind of my rebuttal to that as well is like, I would prefer on a team like this if it's going to be screens offense to see more things that benefit from the screens. Because like
Yep.
we can say that Slurpuff on screens sounds fun, but Slurpuff is like the belly drum set is not like a win button just because you're behind screens, and neither is Salamence of the Dragon Dance just
Right.
because you're behind screens. You know, you'd like to see like if you're gonna like I think that the way to play Grimmsnarl this gen is to really lean into that. And that's why I was a little bit confused is that like screens are good on average, but this isn't really a screen abusing team
Screens
either.
team. Nope, I totally agree.
Maybe Necro. Like DD Necro can maybe do it, I'd say. Like that'd be the biggest thing behind screens that I would consider.
That's
But
definitely something to think about for Brian, I think, is
oh yeah,
he
for
might want to
sure.
find some more screens abusers if he's going to lean into Grimmsnarl, and I'd love to see
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, honestly, like that's an area that I think like the game to some degree could be explored more is in people just spamming screens on stuff like that and saying, you know, I'm going to try and win the game 3 times behind these screens. Deal with it.
Um,
Um,
I
so
totally agree. Totally agree. So
which
let's move to
mhm.
Destiny, and the team is Victorious Bravehearts. So we have Destiny at 13 here, and I can start on this one. I'll
Mhm.
say I was watching this draft, especially early on, because I was filling in the sheet on the mod side, and the first four picks to me are so good. I love
Yeah,
Mega Mawile, Latias, Rotom Heat. Just those three in general they support each other so well. And then Buzzwole is a great pickup. You've already got two things off the ground, and now you've got a ground like a great ground resist
yeah, one of the
behind
best.
Mawile, and you've got like a great dark resist. I mean, it's just overall like those
Mhm.
four just seem really fun. You've got two really nice flying resists, one that can be more, uh, well, both of which can take a hit, but both of which can dish back too. Just
Mhm.
in general, the whole uh, quadruplet there is just amazing. I think Vaporeon's a really really fun mon this gen. Now that it's got, I mean, it had Baton Pass before, but I think Flip Turns is just kind of like you get a little chip off, which is nice. And
Mhm.
I've always liked Vaporeon. I've never felt like it felt too passive for me. It certainly can be, and it might need the right team, but I've always felt that it was serviceable. Um,
Yeah,
Obviously,
I would agree.
love Nidoking. Kind of feel like depending on speed tiers, I might have gone Nido Queen on this team just for an extra, uh, a better rock resist, because Buzzwole doesn't resist rock, and you don't want to rely on Mawile to eat hits. And those are the only rock resists on this team.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Arrow's really fun. Contrary to what a lot of people think, it's not just a sash lead, suicide lead, taunt, whatever. Um,
Mhm.
Alolan Persian is not my favorite mon, but it's good. It's good. I don't think it's necessary on this team unless it's really just to fill a speed tier because, and even then, you've got some really really good resists, like even physical resists to dark. Buzzwole is going to eat most of the hits that Persian wants to eat, other than psychic hits.
Yeah.
And your
I mean,
top two threats are
mhm.
psychic resist. So I don't know. Personally, not for me. Um,
Yeah.
and then the last three, like I love Decidueye. I think the nice thing about Decidueye in terms of the grass ghosts is it can run special, and so you're not always worried about being scalded. Whereas like Delmise and Gorgeist, generally speaking, are going to be more physically
Mhm.
oriented, and so you kind of lose a scald switch in. With Vaporeon, less concerning, but it is something to
Sure.
think about. Vigoroth is Vigoroth. We've seen it do well. Just please don't try to run a rest set because it can't go to sleep. And Inteleon is actually something I've not seen before. It's a great speed tier. I've used it in, I think we had like a randoms league where it came up on my team, but I haven't seen it
Mhm.
used in traditional draft yet.
Yeah. Well, since I, I won't add too much to that. I think that like the way that the way things are falling in is that you have a lot to say about like the good things that you see. I'll mention that I think that this team lives or dies on whether or not it can get any offensive output from anything other than Mawile and Nidoking.
Agreed, totally.
Like that's it. Because to me, I looked at that and I was like, if I'm going into this matchup, I'm looking at it and saying, what are the things that I'm afraid of? And the answer is it's pretty much two Pokemon. So it's going to come down to like, can you get output from anything other than those two, which are big threats,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not without their vulnerabilities. Neither of them are particularly fast. Certainly, Mega Mawile is not known for being speedy, and
Right.
Nido can kind of sit in the middle,
Yep.
but it's all about like how much offense can you get from everything else.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's
Agreed.
that's what I would like if this team like if it was constructed a little bit differently, if there were like maybe a couple more kind of like low tier threats or maybe another top piece up there instead of kind of like the way things sorted out the way they did. I think I could rank this a lot higher. But
Mm-hmm.
right now that's for me that was the thing that really made me kind of wonder like can this team be successful? And the
This
answer honestly like I said if they can get something from a Pokemon other than Nidoking and Mega Mawile, yeah, it'll probably be okay. We'll probably do well.
this is something that comes up for me a lot when I'm just sort of mulling over the theory behind a particular draft composition. And it's like the first few Pokemon that you pick or the highest tier Pokemon that you pick, at least a healthy portion of those, maybe half, maybe more, should be threatening toward your opponent's prep. And usually I would prefer if that's an offensive threat.
Hmm.
The highest speed tiers on this team are Inteleon and Aerodactyl and Latias. And none of those are particularly scary offensively. I mean, Inteleon definitely has. I mean, it's just running offensive sets, but I don't know much about, how much it's really breaking through. It seems more like it's going to clean up. Aerodactyl is not going to destroy a team on preview, and Latias is usually going to be running support. And I think on this team particularly, it's going to be switching into a lot of things. So,
Yeah.
I could see like Scarf Buzzwole could be really cool on this team if prep makes it so that Scarf Buzzwole is even possible. I haven't really analyzed the resistances here, but you may be forcing Buzzwole into more of a defensive role with Mawile there, depending on how you run Latias, and so there's a lot I think to consider. But
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely agree. Like this is a team that could be a lot better than we've ranked it, depending on the production.
Hmm.
So
That's
let's
true for most any team,
well,
really.
it's kind of a tautology, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, I get you. All
Let's
right.
let's
Go
let's move
ahead.
up here. So next we have Winnipeg Gangars, and this is Lovecraft's team. Do you want to kick us off here?
Ah, yes. So one of the things that I thought about like looking at Lovecraft's team is that yeah, there's a Zarude there, but it kind of shows some age, I guess. And what I mean by that is there's a Corviknight, there's a Zarude. Those are both good Pokemon. I'm kind of not a huge Corviknight fan personally.
Hmm.
It's a little bit weird amongst the Steel slash Flyings, but overall on this team, when you see things like there's kind of a random Alolan Ninetales there, for instance. Uh, that's I think that Mon like has gotten a little bit of slander since Gen 7. Like, yeah, setting Aurora Veil is good, but again, this is a case of, to me, this isn't a team that benefits particularly from Aurora Veil.
Yep.
So, yeah, there's not a whole lot of setup. The closest thing to set up on the team would be like a Calm Mind Latios or like a Bulk Up Zarude.
Or like
Um,
I mean, there's got to be a Volcanion set that sets up in some way, or at the very least, get a flame charge off and start clicking buttons, or like a
yeah,
SD Heracross, you know.
mhm. Yeah. But again, those things aren't like, the kinds of things that are going to set up and completely win,
Right.
really. I mean, Swords Dance Heracross functions almost as well outside of screens.
Yep.
Because you're still going to be clicking close combat, you're still going to be dropping your defenses, you're still going to
Yep.
be busting holes and stuff, but you're not really there. Like SD Heracross is like the pinnacle of like here for a good time, not for a long time.
Yep. Yeah, that's
Like it's
absolutely right.
like yeah, it clicks SD once, and if you can't kill it, then it will kill you. It will kill something.
Well, and there is something to be
Um,
said about and in practice this may not be like totally true, but
mhm.
maybe, I mean, you're setting up a screen. You're basically getting two for the price of one with Heracross if you do it right. It's going to
Yeah,
lower
maybe.
it's going to lower its defense. It's going to lower its defenses, but
Mhm.
that's only lowering it back to base, and it's already got very strong
Mhm.
defense. So if positioned right, you could
Mhm.
get two kills with Heracross running that SD
Yeah.
set.
And even generally, if you position Heracross well, it can get 2 kills like in a
Mm-hmm.
matchup.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that like the big thing for me here was just like I didn't really understand why there was an Alolan Ninetales. I think it's really even on teams that are really built to make Veil work, I think it's kind of underwhelming. But there's still like again, we're still good pieces here. Latios, great this gen, phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are some things that like another pick like Volcanion is a really cool Pokemon that doesn't touch dragons, somewhat infamously. Like that's kind of
Right.
its weakness is that it just cannot do anything to most dragons.
Right.
But cool, and you don't see it drafted a lot, but still neat. Um, yeah, I struggled to put this team a little bit higher than where it is, just because um, again, yeah, the it's gonna it's really hingent on offensive output again from like the top threats, Heracross and Latios. Corv has interesting sets that can do things. Seismitoad's a good Pokemon. There's a lot of good Pokemon on the team, but like from a big picture perspective, I was kind of struggling to say like how do we consistently get wins like week to week? Like what's gonna go out there and get wins for this
Mm-hmm.
team? You know?
So I'll say you mentioned Corviknight just being sort of
Hmm.
awkward in the steel flying category. I definitely agree with that. I mean, obviously the allure of Corviknight early on was that it had a pivot option, and then the allure once people played with it was that it had pressure and it lived everything.
Yeah.
The non-existence of toxic for me is what just it's like what ruins it. I would
Mhm.
definitely take a Corviknight at a slightly lower point value. It's an exceptional backbone piece. It lures things that it's going to lure. And if it's like a lot of bulky Pokemon. If you remove the things that it can't, or that can't, or that if you remove the things that can, the only things that can beat it, nothing else on the other side can beat it.
Hmm.
You can outright win, but the problem with that mentality is something else has to toxic those things. You can't just roost in front of something that can't kill you and do nothing back.
Yeah.
There are setup sets. There's like body press stuff, and there's power trip and stuff like that. But for
Hmm.
me in a draft, I'm looking at a bulky steel that's gonna just act defensively, and I would prefer if that steel um, was was clicking toxic, or like in Skarmory's case, clicking spikes or something. Um,
Toxic spikes. Whirlwind is big. Lack
yep.
of But like, I will acknowledge, by the way, that the opinion that Corviknight is overrated is not a popular one.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
like that's maybe my most controversial Mon's opinion that I'm going to express in this episode.
Yeah, and even I like I don't at all think Corviknight's overrated. I just think it doesn't fit my play style, and I think it's definitely a mon that has to fit a play style. It's not just like a
Mm.
easy button mon to me.
Yeah.
While I was watching this draft, I was a little bit concerned that his only rock resist was going to end up being Seismitoad. He did kind of patch that up with a second ground type in Runerigus. And Runerigus is interesting. I actually haven't seen it a lot. I think in draft, its ability is really fun. Wandering Spirit, I think it's called.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see that. And then Xurkitree is a mon that I've been meaning to draft. I think I have drafted, but had to kind of move it off my team one point or another. I really, really want to see how well Xurkitree does. It's got insane special attack. Obviously, losing Hidden Power was big, and losing that like Z Hypnosis set was a big deal.
Mhm.
But it's got
It
Energy
lost.
Ball, so it's
Yeah, it
it's
lost
got
Tail Glow
Drain.
as well, though. It's
Tail
worth
Glow
noting.
is, of course,
That's
yeah.
really big.
That's a huge and that. See, to me, Xurkitree feels like one of those mons. Um, uh, and I think like a good example of this is like Megalopony, like we were just talking about, where it loses such a central piece of its typical kit, and people just automatically assume that it's not good anymore. And that's true of some Pokemon.
Hmm.
Rest in peace, Mega Manectric. It really isn't that great. Jolteon is like the best example of that in my mind. I think Xurkitree can still do stuff, and mostly it's because it still has Energy Ball and it still has Dazzling Gleam, which means it can hit a fair amount of grounds and it can hit a fair amount of dragons. Um, and as an electric type, that's invaluable. So I think that it'll be an interesting one to see. It's a little slow,
Yeah.
but you know.
I mean, I lean very much towards it being an example of like more akin to that because coverage doesn't quite equate.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like there are a lot of things that it misses. I think it misses Z Hypnosis more than a lot of people
Yep,
realize. And
that's a big
like
one.
and the lack of hidden power also means that it really struggles to run scarf sets that it used to. Like that might still be its best set at this point,
It
but
is, yeah.
like it's still really hard pressed to make that work. So,
Yeah.
but that's that. I'll finish there. I think that's most of what I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's move on here to Goomba, Ultra Paul, and the high neuters. So first round Turtwig, big power
Can
move.
I can I say I'm so angry about this? And like I know that this is like a troll thing to do, like Sobble round one, Turtwig round one. The thing that I'm angry about is that should hurt you. That should
Yeah,
hurt
and the
you
team
more
ended
than
up
getting
like pretty good.
round two Garchomp. I was discussing this with somebody beforehand. Round two Garchomp shouldn't happen unless you're the 16th pick, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Like there's just that should never come back. If you're the 16th pick and there's a Garchomp there, you go get the Garchomp and something to put with the Garchomp.
right.
Like
Which
I
he did
don't.
incidentally, because
Mhm.
Garchomp Gren is like, I mean, it works.
Yeah, that's the thing. So that was the thing is like I was like Matt, I was like this should never happen. Garchomp should never be obtainable for somebody who memed with their first pick.
Right.
That's my soapbox. I'm angry about that.
I
So I'm gonna
think
let you talk. I'm not gonna say anything.
I think my favorite thing about this draft is that Goomba drafted a Turtwig as his first round meme pick, and then proceeded to allow that Turtwig to be his grass type for the draft. Like I kind of expected there to be another grass type at some point. I know it's not necessary. He's got some stuff off the ground and everything, but it's
I'm
just,
gonna break my silence to say that there should be another grass
there
type on
should be
this
another
team
grass type.
because your one thing off the ground is Togekiss. Like
Or
that's it.
does Vanillix have Levitate?
No.
No, that's Cryo. Yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
some things means one thing. He's got a
Yeah.
Togekiss.
Mhm.
So yeah.
I will say the other hard thing about this team, like I'll let you say more things about this because obviously there are good pieces.
Hmm.
If you have a Spectrier, you want things to bust up normals and darks, which
Yep.
typically means a good fighting, and the fighting here is Hitmonchan.
Right. No, that's
I'll say
100% the first thing I saw.
mhm,
Absolutely.
that's hard.
Incineroar is like a good like switch into dark types. It's a good like pivot that I
Sure.
know I've seen can like do things to get Spectrier in. With
Hmm.
whether it be like it's U-turn or like parting shot or something like that.
Yeah.
And Gren can get stuff in too, but I agree. Like a strong fighting type would be a heck of a lot better to
Mhm.
pair with Spectre. There's a Rachi Kiss core. You can't ignore that. Obviously there is an opportunity here to basically just play as as just baseless as possible with Rachi Kiss early game, and then clean up with Spectre or Garchomp, which is great. There's the most broken mon in draft, Arctozolt. What do you have to switch in to Bolt Beak and Icicle Crash? Nothing.
18 points are banned.
Yep, 18 points are banned. That's it. Yeah, I mean, I think overall, like, I like a lot of the mons on this roster. I don't know if the roster is cohesive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there's vulnerabilities within it, and I think that there's spots where it could be optimized. And honestly, I think I would trade the Hail Core for a better fighting 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, I agree with that. Especially because, you've already got like a nice gimmick in Rachi Kiss if you're really trying to have fun. I think
And
swap
that's
out
like
the Hail Core.
beyond having fun, that's just like a solid core synergistically.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
there's a reason that that's a core, and it's really not just the Serene Grace, and I don't think people always realize that.
People don't totally appreciate that for sure. I
Mhm.
think Jirachi is an interesting steal that I know many people have tried and disliked. And I think it's because they often do lean a little bit too heavily into just clicking Iron Head with a scarf. So
Mhm.
I'll be interested to see what Goomba does with this Jirachi on this team in particular. I think like there could be some fun stuff with Spectre as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next team here is New York Nice Guys, and this is LEU. Do you want to start us off here?
Mhm. Um, yeah, sorry, I'm just like looking through the tab there. There it is. This is yes, I remember this team.
The best logo
Yes,
in the
this is
league.
yeah, this is a good logo. Also, this is a team where I struggled personally with where I rated it a couple times because I'd kind of look
Mm-hmm.
back at it and be like, oh, why is it there?
Yep.
Because there's a speed boost Blaziken, very good, and then immediately following that you have Slowbro and Zapdos, which honestly, two just phenomenal Pokemon in
Oh
the
yeah,
format.
yeah.
I mean, Zapdos, huge. I mean, arguably, I mean, very arguably a top Mon.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could, it's not rare these days to see Zapdos in the like late first, early
Early
second.
second is Early second is where I
Mhm.
usually would put it. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's my favorite Pokemon, and it's that for a reason. It's because it's
Mhm.
amazing.
And Zapdos is, I mean, there's so many subtleties to that Mon as to why it's good in draft, and
Yep.
like the addition of Hurricane, the addition of Boots. There's just all these tools that make it just like a phenomenal pickup, and it's this wonderful flex piece. Like, there's really nothing that makes your opponent's offensive flying type more afraid to click U-turn than a Zapdos in the
Yep.
back. Like,
Absolutely.
great Mon. Slowbro, amazing. Teleport is the most brainless thing in the world.
Yep.
It's incredible. Blaziken, yeah. I mean, like, there's a reason we're gonna spend about 3 minutes talking about these three Mons together
Because they're great,
because
and they
they're
support each
great.
other really well.
Mhm. They support each other really well. Those three will win games by themselves.
Yep.
And to be and to be the downer here, they probably will have to. Like,
They might.
the rest of the rest of the team, like there are some good mons there, but like there are a lot of things also that you see that are like kind of like I'd almost categorize them as like past their prime mons, things like Alolan Muck, which was really good last gen
Yep.
and misses its 50% berry set.
Absolutely.
You have Florges, which misses hidden power more than anyone really like admits, I
Mm-hmm.
think, at times.
Yeah.
Lycanroc Dusk, which is very much like, let's talk about like matchup fishing beforehand. Lycanroc Dusk will win by itself some weeks and then will do nothing other weeks.
Absolutely. It's a hit or
Uh,
miss mon. And when it
and
hits,
so
it
that,
really hits. It's got great
yeah,
coverage, but yeah.
exactly, phenomenal. And like, there's other things like I wasn't really keen on like round four Mega Aggron. I felt like that was really early.
Yeah.
Not that the power rankings are dependent on how somebody drafted, but it's also just like, it's a defensive megas are weird as is, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so I think that this is a case of like I loved the top three picks here. And then everything else, like, the rest of the team, like the value picks for me didn't do it as much, but the top was amazing.
Yep. So I had a very similar opinion here, especially the like past its prime. Alolan Muck, Florges. I think there's a little bit of leeway here because there was a time when PCL had Florges as like a low tier 2, and now it's a 10-point mon. Um, I don't actually know that I can say where Florges should be, and I agree with you.
Mhm.
Losing HP was a pretty big deal. Having had used it when HP was still around, I almost never clicked HP, and I always felt like I was wasting a turn when I did that. I would just click aromatherapy and wish and move on, and just hope that it
Mhm.
didn't become too passive for me, or hope that
Mhm.
I could click Moonblast and they didn't have a steal
Yeah.
that could recover.
Tip-
It's really good, and it's probably
mhm.
really good at 10 points. But
Mhm.
I agree. And Florges is probably going to be coming a lot of weeks here too, just because Mega Aggron's going to like a Wish Passer. Um,
Yeah. To me, to make a counterpoint to that as well, just real quick,
mhm.
like it's not so much about like whether or not you click hidden power in my mind, so much as it's the lack of option presents opponents with
Yes.
opportunities.
Yep. No, I
Like
totally agree
I've
with that.
mhm. And there's a lot of things that like I mean I think like there's a lot of things that kind of gained buffs in the gen and that were like came in like things like Melmetal, things like Excadrill's really good now. It's always been really good, but it is certainly
A
good
little better,
now.
yeah.
Galar Slowking. Uh,
Right.
yeah, like you play a G King with Forges and you can't touch it with a 39.5 foot pole.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
Yeah, there's definitely going to be issues, and then
uh,
even just like the prototypical, bring in your Heatran on the Florges, and there's not a question now as to whether that Florges has HP ground, even if it wouldn't
correct.
kill.
Yeah.
If you don't want to take that
Mhm.
risk, you don't have to now. So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
I love a lot of the mons on this team. I love 3-point Regigigas. I really want to see it do well.
Hmm.
One thing that I do like about this team is it's certainly not a overpowered team after the first three, but I can technically see every mon come matchup dependent.
Yeah.
So I do like that. It at least
Mhm.
creates a lot of I don't know, a little more diversity for prep, which is nice.
I suppose so. Yeah, that's fair. I will say, I swear that the amount of times Regigigas got drafted went up like 300% after the last DPL. Because like
Yeah.
everybody saw like there's a replay from DPL last season where it was Greg versus man, I'm trying to remember who. Greg absolutely destroyed someone with a Regigigas. Like it was the most epic Gregulator moment. And then after that, like I swear I see that mon in every draft.
It's basically, I mean, it's always been low. It got sub and protect now, right? I mean, it got ways to actually stall out. For the most
I think
part,
it's always had those.
did it? I think it.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think it
fairly certain
more.
it has.
I'm pretty sure. I'll look it up.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it more recently got tools to actually set up, and that's why people have started drafting it more often. Obviously, replays help, but
Mhm.
let me see. It did. Yeah, it did
Mhm.
not have protect last gen.
No, I'm actually looking back to Diamond Pearl. It had both protect and substitute. So yeah, it's always had them.
What?
Yeah,
I'm literally not seeing protect in Sun and Moon.
that's.
Did it lose it
Hmm.
and
I
get
just
it?
went back. I just went back to the Diamond Pearl decks on like Smogon and found it there. But anyways, like it's in the
Well,
recommended sets for then.
okay, so
So
it had sub last gen, but I'm
and
not.
protect.
I'm so confused. Well, anyway.
Regardless, yeah. I was pretty convinced it's always had those because like I remember when I first like got into competitive Pokemon, I looked up Regigigas because I was like, maybe this is good. And then it was like we recommend running sub and protect to try and stall out the turns of your garbage ability. Like, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway,
I
but
guess,
regardless.
huh? So someone correct us if we're wrong. I'm under the impression that it always had sub but didn't have protect until now, but I'm probably wrong about that. Anyway, Regigigas is a fun mod. I mean, usually that whole conversation we just had is completely immaterial, and all it does is be a fat normal type that clicks Thunderwave and knockoff. But it does that really well. So for 3 points, I don't mind that really. All right. Let's move on to our next is Smeargle with the Chicago Marowaks. Do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, the Chicago Marowaks, you said?
Yes, that is CHW.
Gotcha. I was looking for CHM for a second there. Ah, yes. This team is so interesting to me because it looks like it was built for Sun and Moon. Like, honestly, this looks like a Gen 7 draft
It
to me.
does. Yeah, it does.
Um, so I think my thoughts with this team were like we're starting to kind of get into teams that have like a little bit more cohesion to them in terms of like the whole thing. Like other teams I feel like had good cores in them and there were maybe a couple months that I didn't really care for or things like that. Then that was like my critique of the team. Whereas this is like feeling, I really like how the whole team here feels. There's still a couple things like, Delmise, I get why it's there. Let's have a Delmise because our Ferrothorn isn't it's not a ground resist.
Right.
Let's have something that like has removal options.
Right.
Um, and especially when you have a Zardex, like removal is king. Like you need removal. Um, and so, and for this team, that looks like Delmise, Crobat, and Mew. And Mew is really you. Ideally, you should not be running defog on Mew most
Right.
weeks,
Of
if
course.
ever.
Of course.
But Crobat can do it well. Delmise can almost always afford the slot for Rapid Spin, But uh, the linchpin of the team is really how much can you get out of Zardax, and
That's
sometimes
it.
you can get a lot.
That's it.
And
Yeah.
Mew, incredible, right in the right hands, phenomenal Pokemon. Can do a lot offensively, can do a lot defensively. The Stall Breaker set is never a bad bring, where you just click like Super Fang and Toxic or like Will-O-Wisp or
Right.
Taunt, all. Um, it can be built a million different ways. We all know what Mew can do. Like, and so I think that
We all
it's a really cool
simultaneously
thing.
know and have no idea.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, because people who innovate with Mew, like, there's always something else that it can
Oh,
do.
always, always.
And yeah,
Yeah. So
so
I'll echo all of that. I mean, so this is 100% a team that I would draft. Plus a Mew. I've never
yeah,
drafted Mew before. I've always thought about trying it, and I always just don't. But um, Zardex, Ferrothorn, Sylveon, Raikou, Crocodile. Those five are all mons that I've drafted several times, and I love all of them. I totally agree that uh, the linchpin of this team is going to be how much Smeargle can get out of Zard.
mhm.
I think with Mew, you can do a lot of really fun support. I've seen Mew Zard do really, really well. Um, and you can get that Zardex going. Just for, I guess, a momentary educational purpose, do you want to have a brief conversation as to whether or not Zard got better or worse this gen? Because it's a hot topic that I feel like no one ever has the right answer to or an answer to. Um, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. I know we've discussed it at least once before.
Yeah. The conclusion I've arrived at after thinking about it a little bit, and I will say also, like, I could be wrong about this.
Oh, right.
I know a lot of people are just not hot on Zardex this gen. And it's like it doesn't make sense that like heavy duty boots is not a nerf to Zard,
Right.
right? Like the fact that it can't use an item, it's never been able to use.
Right.
What I've settled on is just that it's made other options that do similar things better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you talk about something like Victini, which is like kind of, it's different than Zard for sure. It's obviously not, you're not dragging dancing with a Victini. But like all of the things that are kind of similar to Zard got better because they got boots.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, we have all these teams floating around where defog to some degree is de-emphasized. It's not no
Mm-hmm.
longer as important to pack a lot of removal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's freed people up to draft teams that are different. That's freed, team comps up in a different way than compared to previous gens where, to operate something like Zardex, you needed to have very, very solid defog, very, very solid spinners.
Right.
Um, it's harder to do that now. I mean, it just like, and especially when other things got better and you stayed the same. I mean, it's really like ultimately it's kind of power creep in a way.
Right.
That's where how I feel about Zard. It's still very good. It's still a really, really great mid-game breaker. But in Gen 8, a lot of the things that operate similarly to it got that buff from
Hmm.
boots, and it did not.
So I'll give my 2 cents on it, and I'll lead with this. The jury is out from my perspective. Like, I think that it needs to be proven as more or less successful, and I think that a lot of people are shying away from it. So it's gonna take a little while for us to appreciate what the actual result is. Um,
Mhm.
I think um, the most obvious quote unquote buffs that Zard got, those being Scorching Sands and Scale Shot, are basically immaterial. I mean, Scale Shot's not a contact or whatever. It's not boosted by Tough Claws. Um,
Mhm.
and Scorching Sands is like, it's cool. It's definitely cool. But Zard has Earthquake. So I mean, other than
Mhm.
the slight opportunity, what is a 30% chance, like Skull, to burn, which is useful if you're running like a bulky Zard. You're probably not going to
Yeah,
be using a slot for that on a bulky
it's
set anyway.
yeah. Realistically,
Um,
scale shot is the actual like closest thing to a buff
Closest
there.
thing. Yeah, I agree. Because it uses it in a similar way that, like, Garchomp does or Haxorus does, where or Tyrantrum, where
Yeah,
you can get
SD.
faster while, yeah, SD, exactly. You can feel more
Mhm.
comfortable running SD, which, Zard usually ran Dragon Dance from my experience. There's some SD, but 100 kind of needs a little bit more of a speed boost to get going. Now that it's kind of mid after the speed creep. So my opinion on the boots thing is it's really hard to nail down. I think it's a perspective thing. I think that we, as just a Mons community, have always had this like underlying anxiety about whether or not our opponent is going to feel inclined to set up stealth rocks, and we're going to have to deal with it by losing momentum and clicking defog. This gen, you don't lose as much by clicking rapid spin. It's actually a easier click because it can be used offensively and get rid of stuff on your side as long as it's not blocked. So I think the buff to rapid spin in an indirect way made it easier to remove and more likely to remove. I think that people are less inclined to set rocks against most teams that don't have a Zard X or a Zard Y or something
Mhm.
like that, Mega Pinsir,
Yeah, for sure.
because you see a Volcarona and you're like, well, it's wearing boots, so like, what's the point of setting rocks? So I think we're all really used to not having to worry about hazards nearly as much, and drafting something like Zard X is just teleporting back to Gen 7 where that feeling was already there. We already felt like, oh, well, if I draft this Charizard, people are going to set up stealth rocks the moment they get a chance. So I can't give them the chance. That's how we've always played. And so I don't think logically, it's gotten worse. I think if
I don't.
anything, the
Yeah,
buffs to rapid spin and the somewhat lowered inclination to set rocks otherwise has made it better. But it's hard to say.
see, but like my rebuttal to that would be like and I'm not going to go into this for a long time because
Sure.
we've already kind of gone way off here. But like the buff to rapid spin is cool, but only really contextually valuable to a small number of Pokemon.
Agreed.
Like for instance, Delmise, not really benefiting from it.
No.
Like most, things like Excadrill can benefit occasionally, from the boost. Like that's neat, but I don't know that it's enough of a buff to really argue that because that changed, Zard got better. Um, you know, I think that really, regardless, it's still the thing that we can both agree on is that it has stayed the same. Like it's still a Zardax.
Exactly. Exactly. In
Mhm.
my opinion, it stayed the same. There's nothing that's made it technically worse other than
Yeah,
perception.
but it's also worth noting that this is the last thing I'm going to say, I swear. But like perception is big in
It's important.
Pokemon, and
It's
and the
important.
thing is, like, I mean, you see things like Doug Trio goes back, gets used in previous gens in like Smogon tours and builds because of the success it had in later gens.
Yep.
You know, the things that happen now, I mean, influence the way that the game is played, and the trends that happen now influence the way that it's played.
Absolutely.
Across metagames,
Uh,
and even across generations.
and I'll say, as just a final point, um, I think there's often an inclination to hear someone say, oh, Mega Charizard X got worse This
Hmm.
generation, there's an inclination to respond to that with, well, you're just saying, LOL, Mega Pinsir bad, weak to rocks. Mega Pinsir was always really good. Mega Charizard X was always really good. Um,
Yeah.
Us potentially saying that it's either the same or maybe struggling a little bit due to this perception is not should not be equated with LOL bad because of rocks.
Oh no,
It's
not
the
at all.
result of people thinking LOL bad because of rocks that actually does materially change the game. It's just very interesting, and I wanted to bring it up, but we won't
Mhm.
belabor
We're
it
gonna have to
anymore.
timestamp this as like, separate conversation about perception in
About
Pokemon.
perception of
And
boots.
and I think it's also really weird in draft, like because we don't have like this community isn't so big and so organized that we have like usage statistics. And even if we did, I don't think
Right,
we quite have the sample size that like, like an OU metagame has to show trends and how things behave or how good things are.
right.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's just like it really is ultimately like it comes down to like what people are using and what people perceive as good.
Yep,
But like ultimately, yeah, I think that like with Zard, it's just still what it is.
it's still
Like,
a Zard. It's as good as
yep.
ever. All right, let's
Hmm.
move on to number 8. We're hitting the higher up here teams. This is Sick Bid with the Wisconsin Whiscash. So I'll go ahead and take a start on this.
Go
This is
for it.
terrifying. Personally, I
Hmm.
think this is terrifying. I think it's lacking some stuff, particularly on the special side for me, offensively. But
Hmm.
anytime you see Torn Blissey, that's already scary. Throwing a Moongus in there for a regen core, throwing a Loma Mola. Personally, not my kind of mon, but it is something that I've lost to because I couldn't break. Um, I think that everything from Scrafty down is not great. Um, I think I think Scrafty's a great mon. I just don't know how great it is on this team. Aromatisse
Hmm.
is basically the same as Florges in a lot of ways, but a little bit worse. Stunfisk is actually, I think, a really nice low tier option, and especially if you're doing double ground and you want to take pressure off Zygarde, that's actually kind of nice to have. Shedinja's kind of a meme. I mean, it can help like force prep a little bit because no one ever wants to be forced into a position where they can't touch a Shedinja. But and Boots does make it better, but we won't talk about the viability of Shedinja for too long. The star of the team, the stars of the team, in my opinion, the ones that I immediately look at and say I really need to figure out how to beat these are Mega Scizor, Zygarde, and Victini. Victini's terrifying because you need something to check it defensively, and obviously, very few teams, mine included, have a check to Zygarde. My team doesn't. I know a lot of teams don't. And Mega Scizor is just something that can offensively destroy you and that you also can't break. I
Hmm.
have seen Mega Scizor on regen core teams before with Torn, Amoonguss. It's actually really, really good pivoting around with those mons, and they support it really well to get set up. Um, Victini and Zygarde are terrifying offensively. For me, the one thing that's missing and the one thing that would have made me make this a little bit stronger or higher up of a team is a special breaking power. But other than Torn, there's not a lot here that's going to be breaking specially unless you do like some weird Specs
Hmm.
Victini or something.
Yeah. To continue being the downer of the duo here. The other thing that's like scary to me looking at this team is mono flying resist Stunfisk.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, because offensive flying Pokemon exist and they are generally, gonna like hit hard. They are really only concerned with whether or not you resist the hit.
Yeah.
Scizor can maybe check some of them, but like, you talk about this
And
team
Blissey.
versus something like, yeah, you talk about something like like a Galar Zapdos or I don't think Staraptor got drafted, so it'd be kind of a moot point. But like just offensive flyings in general versus this team, like what is your if Blissey can't switch in on it, if Stunfisk has to be your answer,
Right.
and that's not great.
Right.
I'm not gonna lie, that's not ideal. So it's not without its, and like I think that like another thing that I noted was like Torn is the only off the ground thing here.
Yep. And
So
Amoonguss doesn't
yeah.
resist it.
So you're, yeah, and those are types where resistances are pretty important, right?
Yeah.
Like you want to have, like, it's nice to have a ground resist or to have even multiple ground immunities. Um, it's nice to have, like, and to some degree, like, Scizor can sponge hits, but like the team starts to, look a little bit scared when you run into something like a Swords Dance Garchomp, for instance.
Right.
Like, where do we go from there? It's not to say it's bad. Like I said, like you said, I think the regen core is really great. Alomomola to me is like a high skill ceiling mon. I
Yeah.
think that like most people playing Alomomola don't realize how hard it is to play that in such a way that it benefits your team and doesn't hurt you.
Right.
Um, there are a couple of players at the very high levels who have played Alomomola incredibly and have gotten a ton out of it. But it's hard
Yep.
and it requires a lot. So,
Yeah.
hey, all power to anyone who wants to try. I'm personally too smooth brained to ever make that thing work.
No, I agree with you so much. Alomomola, and in my opinion, Alomomola is not the only mon on this team that's like that. I've definitely thought that I can click buttons and rely on smooth braining a few mons that are on this roster. I think this roster can do super well. The only reason I didn't bring up in my just like initial thoughts on this team that I didn't bring up, Stunfisk being the only flying resist, Torn being the only thing off the ground is because this team is really fat. The whole roster is really fat. And so
Mhm.
you do alleviate some of those concerns of having particular type weaknesses just because the mons themselves can pivot around decently well and you do have regen options. But I agree, something like an SD Chomp or really SD anything with Edgequake would give this team a lot of hell. So, I think overall a very good team. I think this team can position Zygarde, Mega Scizor, and Victini to win in a lot of instances, but it has to avoid certain pitfalls on the way, especially losing a lot of momentum.
Mhm. Yeah,
All right.
agreed.
So you want to kick off here with Alex and the New York Lux Rays at number 7.
Man, this is an Alex team. Ugh. It's just like it's fat stuff, I know Alex loves Gliscor. Throwing in Toxapex, a DOD on there.
Right.
Um, yeah, no, this is like the prototypical Alex team, I think. Like this guy has a reputation for drafting like fat things and playing with those. Gliscor is obviously very, very good. Everyone already knows the whole thing. The
Of
no
course.
hidden power sword stance sets are very good.
Mm-hmm.
Two incredible abilities. Although like poison heal is just beyond anything
Just
anybody could
broken.
imagine for this mon. It's just broken. Yeah, like let's just make ourselves immune to status and heal ourselves for
Mm-hmm.
1/8 of our health every turn for free. Incredible
With
Pokemon.
the option to click
Um,
Roost if you need it.
yeah. Yeah. So you talk about things like Gliscor and Pex, like they just have this insane staying power.
Yep.
Deoxys defense is going to get hazards on you. Mega DNC is, a great cleaning mon. Kartana and Mega DNC on the same team are very, very interesting. Cinderace, decent Pokemon. It's fast. I'm not really crazy about stuff like Galar Moltres, and really anything like that I haven't mentioned here. Like Beware, Doublade, Glaceon, Lurantis. I think
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of but the pieces are there for this to be like like I said, the prototypical like Alex team.
Yeah.
Just kind of fat stuff that like he like uses to position like bigger threats that can clean up.
Yeah.
Um,
So I would categorize Alex's playstyle as like hyperstall. He
hmm,
kind of pivots around with stall-ish fat until he's able to position something like Kartana is a perfect example, or Mega Diancie can definitely win a game. I think Cinderace is a good. I agree with just like your tone with Cinderace. Like it's a really good option. It's very good for his speed tiers, he needed something a little bit faster.
Yeah,
And
you
it,
want
and
something
it,
fast and Yancey for sure.
right, and it certainly can win a game. And you know, I also think that a strong fire type does pretty well with you know, Mega Diancie. I actually personally love Beware. I actually suggested Beware to Alex when we were talking in DMs. I just think it's a mon that can be used better than we've seen, and I think that he would use it really well. Um, I think Doublade often gets a lot of fleck. I understand it. It's not a like I don't know. There's obvious problems with Doublade, but at the end of the day, like I would draft a Doublade if I really needed it, and I think that you know, harkening back to a conversation that we had a little bit earlier. Um, wait, I'm just realizing something.
Yeah.
Didn't we discuss a Cartana team already?
No, I don't think we did.
We
I think
didn't.
you might be thinking of a different of the other league.
Okay, so maybe you and I had a brief conversation before.
We may have.
Well, anyway, flash forward to the Origins video.
Yeah, flash forward to
um,
the Origins video for sure because yeah,
there's
there's
a.
definitely a
Oh, yes, I know exactly. Yep. So, anyway, it is good to draft a steel behind
mhm.
Cartana. And so, at the very least, a bulky steel type like Doublade, when, you know, when you've got Cartana on your roster, like, I'm not complaining about that personally. I think Glaceon's a nice filler pick at 2 points if you want a nice resist. And I think it can get off the ground a little bit. It can get a trick kill. And then Lurantis is probably there for defog since Moltres Geller doesn't. And you don't want to always force Gliscor to defog, especially if you want to
Yeah,
run an offensive set. Um,
yeah.
and
You'd prefer a defogs as little as possible, frankly.
right,
And
and you know, contrary to everyone's, I think, massive concern when Cinderace was released, court change is like not that busted because they just get
no.
rocks up again and that's it. Um, but I do think that, you know, DoD will get spikes up. It's very very good at doing that, and any team that can almost guarantee get spikes up and has a Mega Diancie and a Cartana is gonna get some wins.
Hmm. Yeah. I guess the only thing I would like disagree with you on there is that like I don't think Doublade is like that great a steal to have behind Cartana because you do want a second steal, but Doublade is very much like it's kind of the same, you know? Like it has a
Yeah,
lot of the like we're talking about two steals in a row that are physically nearly impervious and specially very frail. You know, so
that's
it's like
fair.
that
That's
that's
fair.
the one thing where I was kind of like, I'm not so sure about those two together. But like it's Alex. I'm not gonna question it. You
Yeah,
know,
and
the
you know he's got options for special bulk anyway. But I do agree with
mhm.
that. I actually have never really investigated too far into like the special bulk on Double Aid or even just like a Spinef
Mhm.
set. And so that's good. That's informative. All right, let's move on to um, oh, Robbo, who actually this is spelled wrong.
On the sheet.
It's on the index. That should be two B's. We made that mistake early on, and he's been too nice to correct it, I guess. But and the Munster Mudbray.
Mhm.
Do you wanna kick this one off here?
I can go ahead and do that. Yeah, because there's an Urshifu, and Urshifu's broken. Like very good
We're
Pokemon.
done.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have to talk about the rest of it.
Honestly,
Yeah, I looked at this.
the top three are insane. Sorry, you
Mhm.
can start.
Yeah, it's. I actually don't like have a ton to say about this one because I think that like this is another case of like a couple picks that I kind of disagree with. I think it could have this one could have gone up or down,
Mm-hmm.
but the strength of like Urshifu, Clefable, Kyurem, Mega Arrow really carries it in my mind.
Yep.
Um, Salazzle's a great pick here for bridging. I think Skarmory is a great Pokemon.
Yeah.
Great might be pushing it. It's good. Um, and there's a couple things that I'm like not so keen on, like, you know, I think the budget picks, things like Jolteon, Orbeetle, Wartortle are like a little bit suspect. You know,
Yeah.
Jolteon, so we talked about Jolteon as like one of the bigger like loss cases in
Right.
the removal of hidden power. Um, but I think that like the difference between me, like for or sorry, the difference for me between this team and teams in like kind of the bottom half of PRs is that I feel like there's the right amount of kind of bulkier things that kind of sit there, things like Skarm and Gastrodon, combined with things like Urshifu, Kyurem, Clef, Arrow that can exert like a whole lot of offensive pressure. Like Clef is very flexible in that sense.
Yeah.
Because Moonblast is honestly just a broken move. Very powerful, very spammable. Um, yeah, no, I think that this is a pretty well assembled team. I think my only big criticism of it was, yeah, some of the low tiers and worrying that there wasn't really enough momentum on the team to keep getting Urshifu in over
Yep.
and over again. And that's my thoughts.
Yeah. So, Rabo was I guess, my draft ally or draft buddy.
Hmm.
We were both on the wheel, and so we sort of talked a lot about, what's the rule of thumb, or like what's really the best way to utilize the wheel. One thing I'll say is he was first overall, I was last overall, but he really did a good job of utilizing the wheel, in my opinion. He made sure to, obviously, Urshifu single is just a great Pokemon. But getting Clefable Kyurem on the way back is just like crazy,
Yeah.
crazy value. Clefable and Urshifu single alone are gonna, just win some games. I think what I mean by that is you're gonna be able to look at the matchup and know instantly what you're gonna do with Clefable and how it's gonna support Urshifu, or it's gonna like break alongside it or something. Kyurem is just strong. Like I
Yeah.
mean, everyone knows that right now. It's like the hot topic.
Mhm.
Every team's built a
Yeah.
Kyurem.
And
Um,
a pinnacle example of something that can have its life changed by the addition of boots,
uh huh. Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
where Kieran was like a tier 3 middle round pick kind of thing last gen.
Did
That
it?
where some teams would have it if it was cool. But
Um,
yeah,
this may be another conversation where I'm wrong, but it did not have freeze dry last gen. I'm right about
it
that,
did.
right?
You are correct about
Okay,
that. It did not have freeze dry.
we went over Regigigas, but I thought I was right about this one. So freeze dry, obviously is a huge deal. Everyone just gushes over freeze dry, and it is a very very good move, and Kyurem utilizes it extremely well. Obviously, Kyurem has other options that are really really fun for draft. I think it gets DD now, right? And it has like Icicle Spear,
Mhm.
so you can do some fun physical stuff. Though you might still be running like Earth Power, but it's a very very fun mon. I want to see Rabo do some like really creative stuff with Kyurem rather than just run like Scarf for Specs like you see on the ladder. But regardless, Scarf for Specs is going to do extremely well with Clefable getting it in. Um, Skarmory and Gastrodon is just great defensive backbone. That's
Mhm.
I love the steel flying groundwater backbones. They have issues, but they're really, really good in most instances. I agree, Salazzle's really fun. You and I know that you've used Salazzle to great success, so I'll be
Yeah.
excited to see some fun Salazzle play. Um, Orbeetle is a mon that like I always consider. I think webs can be useful with Urshifu if you're running like Bandit. It's definitely good for Kyurem. You and I have agreed many times that webs is not really a great hazard, and that was before Boots was even around. Um, so it's I don't know. It's a very situational hazard that can be used very
Mm.
effectively. Maybe
It
not.
forces respect for sure.
It forces
You have to
respect.
respect
It
webs.
forces a little bit of prep, and maybe at the very least, going back to our conversation about boots and defog and perception, if people are on the whole defogging and rapid spinning less just because of the existence of boots, they may not pack it on every build. When you're looking at when you're staring down webs on the other side, especially for like a 7 point mon rather than like a 1 point Swirlix or something, you kind of expect that they would come, and so you do have to prepare for that. You may lose momentum, or you may lose a slot just to pack defog. So there is that, or you may not be running it and then realize, oh shoot, they have webs. Gorgeist has never been a mon for me, but I know it's good. It's got Poltergeist, and
Mm.
it's an actual grass type that can serve as a grass type. Um,
Yep. Right.
Jolteon is, in my opinion, only a serviceable pick, and only one that I am in support of because it's 6 points, and to the extent that your opponent doesn't have any checks left because of the crazy breaking power you have up top, Jolteon could clean up in a game. It's got good speed, it's got good special attack. And it can also, technically, if you build it like a little bit bulkier and feel comfortable switching in, it can pair well with Skarmory and it can pair well with Mega Aerodactyl. So that's great. Mega Arrow is something that we can spend a million hours talking about the front three and never get to Mega Arrow, and then realize Mega Arrow can win games. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah.
And it's a great speed tier on this team. And
Mm.
Wartortle is just a, shell smash once and hope to do something mon. But overall,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
this is a really,
Very
really
broken.
fun. I think this is a really fun draft. I think that
Mm.
I think this is placed really well here.
The I like the arrow pick on something like this because as somebody like told me once, like arrow is up there in terms of things that just completely neuter every flying type you'll play.
Yep.
Like the I talked earlier about like a draft that was like a little bit weak to like physical birds. Arrow takes those out of the equation very quickly, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's basically next only to Zapdos in terms of things that just completely neutralize the effect of flying type on your teams.
Yep. Absolutely.
So,
Um,
all
so
right.
so let's move on to Dilly. Dilly's team, the Denver Nuggets. So I can kick this one off here.
Yeah,
Um,
actually, the Denver Nuggets. Oh my gosh,
yeah, yeah. The logo's
I
great
knew they were
too.
Denver. I didn't know. I didn't know they were actually.
Yep,
Oh, it's
Denver Nuggets, and
nice.
a Provo Pass or yeah.
Let's let's just hope they don't play a Sun team.
you
That's a time relative joke.
that's a that's
That's
don't watch this video months from now.
yeah, it won't make any
It
sense.
won't well, it'll make well, maybe it will. Next year.
Yeah.
So Pulse, Rotom Wash, Galar King, Drill, Arcanine, Comfey, T-Tar, Mega Pidgeot, Virizion, Celio, and Swadloon. So this is a classic example of 8 or 9 really good mons, or at least serviceable mons, and then two that you're just like, sure. Those exist. And really, those two 1 point mons are just there to balance the type matchup chart when your opponent is building, so they don't realize that you're a little bit ice weak or something.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I honestly, like, that's really the reason that they're there. Celio was a dugong until very recently. I don't think either of them are going to be extremely useful, but the top 9, it seemed like a really fun team to me.
Should not
Polt,
come to games, yeah.
yeah, right. Polt and Galar King, I mean, we know just from ladder, is really, really good. Drill is a fantastic mon on its own, but given sand is really, really nice. It's interesting the Mega Pidgeot pick because um, I personally, I think that like Mega Pidgeot and Drill is something that I've thought about drafting before, because Drill does pretty effectively get rid of rocks on your side, and so that big concern that we have in Gen 8 about our flying megas that can't hold boots getting chipped by rocks, especially one like Mega Pidgeot that wants to U-turn around. That's pretty useful. And then you've got Rotom Wash who can defog things as well. I think the team actually has a really good balance of bulk and breaking potential, and there's also a few mons here that have setup potential. T-Tar can set up. Dragapult obviously is known for setting up. Um, I'm a little more hyper offensive in my playstyle, so I would personally like to see a little more mons that could set up. But that's just me.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, I rated it pretty highly. I think that there's like there are preference things that could be done a little bit differently. I
Mm-hmm.
think that looking at this, the two biggest question marks in my mind were like I'm not even going to talk about Celio and Swadloon.
Yeah,
Like
that's yeah.
they're obviously
They're
not Pokemon.
they're there.
They're there. Um, I'm not super keen on like Virizion as the grass type. It's okay.
Right.
Um, I think that like Clutch has mentioned that he doesn't particularly care for Virizion. I'm less concerned with it. It's decent.
Yep.
It's not like it's offensively, it's nothing unless it has a sword stance, and even then, it really won't break through things.
Right.
I don't think hot take me here. I would love this team if Pursuit still existed and Tyranitar had it.
Yeah. No, a hundred
Um,
percent. 100% I
yeah,
agree.
it's. I mean, honestly, I'd put it like I'd put it top three easily.
Yep.
Because like, and the thing is, in my opinion, this generation, T-Tar, not the greatest sand setter. I think that you get more from Hippowdon and Gigalith.
Agreed. At
Because
least at least
yeah,
Hippowdon. I totally agree.
mhm. Yeah. I think that you get like to me the big thing to me is that even Gigalith has more staying power than T-Tar. Where like it doesn't have a quad. It's it gets rocks up. Like
Hmm.
having drafted both T-Tar and Gigalith, if your goal is to set sand, they perform very similar functions.
Yep.
And the other thing is that like T-Tar does have those setup options. It can run choice band, but if you try to do those things, it takes away from it being your setter.
Right.
It really does because it's like all of a sudden it's something that you have to worry about positioning as well.
Right.
So again, and I feel like I don't want to pull a whole like I'm the authority on this because I've done this a lot, but I've probably had more sand teams than any other type of team this generation. I think probably like 4 to 5 times I've played sand.
Yeah.
And having said that, like, yeah, I think T-Tar as a setter is not ideal. It's you spend a lot for it when you could like save and get something like, Gigalith takes pressure off of Drill to be your ground. Uh, Sorry, not Gigalith. Yeah, Gigalith takes pressure off of Drill to be your flying resist.
Right.
Hippowdon will take pressure off Excadrill to be your mono ground. Stuff like that.
Right. Right.
T-Tar, I know, like I said, I've harped on this for a while, but like something that I could see for this team would be like if there was a way to get a different dark, if you go from T-Tar down to like Gigalith and then upgrade Comfy, like that looks pretty cool. But
Yeah.
Comfy's not bad on the team because of Galar Slowking. That's the big thing for me is that like a good player who I respect quite a bit in a team tour environment recently mentioned that like Galar Slowking is kind of like it performs a similar role to a lot of fairies, and it's interesting in that way. It's a very unique Pokemon in draft,
Hmm.
and so in that sense, like going for a more budget fairy on this team, I don't hate.
That's a really
Yeah.
really good. That's a really good point. I appreciate
I
that.
thought it was like yeah, when they said that, I was like, that's kind of true.
Yeah.
Like
It fits
talking
the
about
role.
like yeah, the fighting resist, like there's no fairies beat Galar Slowking. Very few fightings really threaten it meaningfully.
Right.
It's not a dark resist, but we have dark resists on this team, that's for sure.
Yeah, and when I'm talking about like the fairy I need to fill a particular role, I'm not always thinking about resisting dark just because I know that I do generally resist dark in other places.
Yeah, you get a
Um,
fighting type, you'll
and,
get
and
a
and yeah,
dark.
exactly. And generally speaking, the fairy role is going to be a little bit more of a special sponge, and that is exactly what Galar King is. You have to respect it for that. So,
Mm,
yeah, no, I totally agree. I think if it's available, and I'm pretty sure it is, moving T-Tar down to Gigalith and finding value elsewhere.
mm.
Um, I, hell, keep the 1 point Mons, but like bring up something else to make it more valuable. I would love to see this team adjusted a little bit, but even as is, I think it can be a very successful team. I'm interested to
Yeah.
see Dilly use sand. I don't think that I've seen her use sand before, um, but I think that it would fit her playstyle just fine.
Yeah, it's again, like having played it a lot, it's interesting. It is very matchup sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Because like there are some matches where sand just goes crazy. And I think that in the hands of players who are very good at positioning, like I've seen like M Dragon play sand in like
Yep.
at the Ubers level, for instance, in
Mm-hmm.
BBL, for like a couple seasons now. And he's very, very good at seeing how to like position drill to win games.
Yeah.
Even like from behind, from anything. It's positioning sensitive, it's matchup sensitive, but it's so strong in the right hands.
Awesome.
So
Awesome. Awesome.
yeah.
So let's move on to what is this number four?
Or
Number 4, if you want to take this first, we have Bruins. Our
Oh
Charg
yeah.
with the Melrose Meloetas.
Oh yeah, I ranked this team pretty high
Oh
because
yeah,
I liked it.
it's a good team.
Um, I was complaining to somebody last night, or no, I was complaining about teams to somebody last night for another draft, and we're poking fun at a draft where it was like, oh hey, look, it's Tapu Lele plus a bunch of things that aren't threatening. Like expecting Tapu Lele to carry your draft is ridiculous, but like
Hmm.
I looked at this and I was like, okay, so now we have like this is cool because there's 3 or 4 Mons that in any given week could be more valuable in the matchup than Lele.
Yep.
So all of a sudden it's relegated to being second or third. It's there's other things that are bigger threats. Como, phenomenal Pokemon,
Yep.
can do a lot, can win on its own. Lando T, we know it's very good. Great rock setter, great scarf user, great choice user in general. Um, in a pinch can be run, especially like there's
Hmm.
everyone knows what Lando does at this point.
Lando's great.
Melmetal, though, in one of the like weirdest tracks of hype in the entire like the generation,
Yeah.
where we went from choice band being apparently overpowered because it 2K KO'd weird stuff, and to oh it's not broken because every bulky water runs helmet, to
Hmm.
like now people are kind of figuring out how to run it to some
Right.
degree. It's been weird. And so yeah, top level is really great. I think like the top like 4 Mons phenomenal. Serena I think is like like people differ in their opinions of whether or not it's good. Like I think you generally like Serena, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then I'm of course my close and personal friend Clutch sometimes hates it. I'm so I'm just caught in the middle.
I
Um,
personally love Serena when you have something like Lantern that can take a Scald. I think the only problem with Serena is it's a physical grass type, and so you can't switch it in on
mm,
a Scald. If you have options though, and I will say one thing about this team, other than maybe like a bulky licky licky, is Lantern is your only option on a Scald. Because Como's not
yeah.
coming in on it either. So that's a bit of an
Mhm.
issue for me.
Mhm. Yeah, I just thought like I think still like this is a solid assembly of Mons. Like
Oh
you
yeah.
worry like you start looking at it and it's like even the budget picks kind of like fit for me.
Hmm.
I'm not so sure on Blacephalon. I've never been really convinced that it's like a great pickup, but it's obviously offensively it can win games by itself. Like I mean, I lost in playoffs many years ago to a flame charge Blacephalon
I
because of
remember that.
yeah
Yeah, I remember that very
yeah
well. I
that
remember
yeah
where I
good
was
set.
standing when I watched that.
Oh my gosh. That hurts me. But yeah, things like Regirock, Licky Licky, Skuntank, good budget
Oh
picks.
yeah.
I think Dottler is when you have 3 points left over, I'd rather have something other than a Dottler. Like I know that people are like convinced that it's good. I think it's like a meme pick. Like I know that people like it's webs, but like still
Yeah, I think it's
it's
Webb's Trick Room. I think is the other thing that I can add, which on a Melmetal team could be useful, though most of the time its checks are going to be really bulky water types or something like that.
yeah, it's just like it's a Dottler. Like people
It's two
people
points.
think it's 2 points. I'm not mad at it. I got a little bit more mad at it when I realized that there were 3 points left over. But that's just me.
Right, right. I think the only other thing about Dottler is it can be run pretty bulky, and it is technically a ground resist, being a bug.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so if there's concerns about that, I mean, I'm looking at Skuntank, Regirock, Blacephalon, Lantern, Melmetal. That's
Hmm.
5 mons that are weak to ground, and you're looking at Landorus, Serena. So,
Yeah.
this team is overall weak to ground. Obviously, Landorus is going to say, I don't care to that most of the time. But, and even Serena can run plenty of bulk to get around that and a synthesis in a pinch. But, yeah, I mean, it's just another reason. Like I
It
said, it's a tight matchup filler.
it's more for me like if there's if there we have all these mons and we have 5 points left over, like I feel like we could get a better ground resist than that. But that's just me.
That's
I'm
probably
not
true.
going to I'm not going to say anything too much more controversial, but that said, if you have been beaten by an Iron Defense Dottler, you might consider retirement.
It's just, yeah.
Sorry, that's my one bitter take. That's all. We can move on.
So I'll echo a lot of what you said on this. I think this team is phenomenal. Again, we talked about this earlier. You got to look at the top like four Pokemon in a draft, five Pokemon in a draft, um, and be scared of them. And like, I am genuinely terrified by the top four Pokemon. I would not want to face this team for sure, just based on those top four. And I agree. I think the budget picks down low, and for me, including the Blacephalon is another top tier. I
Hmm.
think they're all
Sure.
good. I think they can all come week to week. I think that for me, I would have probably put it a little bit lower just because of the ground weakness. But I mean, it's really hard for me to say that when I'm looking at a Landorus. Like
Hmm.
a Landorus, especially a well played Landorus, can make most teams better. Um, if you're worried about a ground weakness, you're probably going to be okay in most instances. Landorus was probably like in a lot of ways probably wants you to click choice scarf or choice band earthquake so it can just come in and do what it does. So I personally
Hmm.
really like Blacephalon. I do think the one other thing about this team that I was a little like mid on is its speed. I think Blacephalon is the fastest thing on the team.
Yeah, I
Um,
won't. I won't disagree with that critique of it for sure.
so and I fully recognize like I'm a different play style than most people. For me, I need something that's above 115, and then I need something that's around 110 to 115, and then I need something that's around 100. I don't care much about what comes below that. Something in the 80s is preferable, just so I don't have like 60 to 90. But like for me, speed tiers are relatively important, particularly on the high end. Now the nice thing about this team is you have a nice diversity of mons that can run Choice Scarf, and so you're kind of alleviating that. And in a lot of ways, you're kind of creating the question in your opponent's mind. Well, what is she going to run Choice Scarf? Is it going to be Lando? Is it going to be Lele? Is it going to be Blacephalon? All three of those are extremely successful Scarf users. And
Yeah.
so, you are already creating mind games in prep, which is great. I think
Yeah.
this one is tiered about right for me. I might put it a little lower just because of the speed and ground weakness, but overall, this is a
Hmm.
fantastic team.
I think yeah, I would put it lower. Like I think that to me, like quality of Mons and fit,
Yep.
like trumps all. And like I said, or like you said rather, um, having good scarf users is a great way to like cover for the fact that your speed tiers are not ideal.
Yeah.
I've seen teams function well before where it's like, okay, so we don't have something that's very, very fast, or like our speed is not that good. It's like, oh, we drafted like what's a good example? Like we got Excel Gore as our like speedy mon. Like not a bad mon, not horrible, but at the same time also like, not a top tier threat.
That's the
But yeah,
thing.
no, I think
That's the thing for me. I
Mhm.
think that
I
when you're like you see teams a lot of the time where they'll draft their speed in lower tiers, and then when you like for me personally, when I put it into like a matchup spreadsheet and start analyzing the matchup for the week, and I look at the page that shows mons organized by speed, and I see that like your fastest threat on your team is like a per ugly. I mean, immediately I'm like, okay.
yeah.
So I think it's important to have your fastest mons be threatening. And on this team, the fastest mons are threatening. It's just like the whole team is compressed down a little bit. But I agree, that's really, really alleviated by the fact that there's a lot of really good Scarf users here. So, you're going to run into stuff like Zero Aura or Coco or like random fast
Mhm.
130, 140, like Polt. They're going to run Modest. They're going to run Adamant. You're going to have to deal with that. But thankfully, a lot of those mons, Landorus does not care about. And so, that's something you don't have to worry so much about too.
Mhm.
All right, let's move on to the top three here. So number three, we have J Caps with the Subtoxic Bros. Do you want to take this one?
Oh yeah. This is interesting. I thought that the top end of this was just crazy to me. This is another one where like, I mean, there's probably always going to be budget picks that I like disagree with a little bit or that I'm not keen on, but people do what they got have to do with the low tiers. And this was the team that to me just fit together so nicely.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is a we're talking about like there's a Megazam at the top, which already phenomenal Pokemon.
Yeah.
JCaps gets round two Celesteela. Well, also like that's still crazy to me. Um, Crazier things get to follow in Origins, but that's for another video.
Yeah,
Um,
round 12
round,
Celesteela.
wasn't it like round three?
I got
I don't know.
Celesteela in Grace. It never got drafted.
Oh my
That's why I said
gosh.
round 12. I picked it up.
Round
I
12.
picked
Okay,
it up in
yeah.
Grace.
Okay, it was in the third slot, so I was like, oh, he got round three. Okay. That's someone was saying that it went undrafted, which I don't think it ever should.
So, we can talk about it later, but
We'll
I
talk it
think,
later.
yeah, I
Yeah.
have reasons to think why it did, but we can talk about it
Yeah, because I also have reasons, but they're rude.
later.
Anyways, yeah, Zera, Terrakion, like we've got like there's like two blisteringly fast things. Zam plus Zera, that's super cool.
Oh, yeah.
Zera plus Terrakion plus Prim is really cool to me. Zera likes its like breakers and things that like threaten grounds, and also like Terrakion is something that like you can put that in a position to force chip on a ground,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is huge, right? We're not just talking Prim that like beats a ground like it's nothing. We're talking about things that like
That lure
force
and
them to come
chip.
in and take
Yep.
damage. Yeah, luring and chipping is huge.
Yeah, it
And
is.
then you finish that out with like Nidoqueen. Seriously, like I looked at this team, and the thing that I thought about it was just like you can bring the top six Mons
Every match.
you could bring them every week.
Every
You could
week.
ignore everything else on the team,
Yep.
and you could bring just those, and you could have a winning season.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's insane to me. That's super cool. It's really well structured. Nido, I love Nido on the team, given that the steel is not a rocker.
Yes.
Nido's really, really consistent at getting rocks up if you need them. The budget picks, like again, they're like I would complain about them if they were like way, way worse. I can complain a little bit about Eldegoss because I think it's just like not a very good Pokemon at all.
Hmm.
But like Audino and Magmar are actually like decent pieces that can come to a game if needed.
Oh, yeah,
You know.
absolutely. Magmar
Hmm.
goat.
Yeah.
So I'll I'm biased. This team looks a little bit like mine. I mean, Celesteela, Zeraora, and of course the Gloomon Magmar. Um,
Yes.
I love Zera Steela. I will be the first to say that I am totally hypocritical because I've been a naysayer of Steela for a very long time, but really only because it doesn't fit my playstyle well. This season, I'm trying to branch out and just do
Hmm.
stuff that makes me uncomfortable, so I have drafted it. But I will absolutely admit that like Celesteela is broken. It's a really
It's
really
very
good
good.
mod,
Very good.
and now it has like like it had crystals last gen, right? And so that was amazing and that was really cool. But it always functioned very well as a defensive piece. Um, it lost that, of course, but it does have other fun stuff this gen. Like it has Meteor Beam, which just
Yeah.
seems like a really fun option, and it's still got Autotomize. So Autotomize Meteor
Hmm.
Beam is like an offensive set that you're not going to expect on this team because you look at Zera, Steela, and Nidoqueen,
Hmm.
and you're like, okay, that's like the like kind of not like defensive, but like the backbone pivot kind of option there to get in Zam, to get in Tarak, to get in Prim. But Steela can run offensive on this team. I absolutely firmly believe that. The only things that like worried me about this team, which there are not many, are there's a to me a very glaring ice weakness. Prim is your only resist. Unfortunately, Articuno as flying type does not resist.
What are you talking about, Magmar, dude?
Okay. Okay, Magmar could come, but I think
Hmm.
that your most serviceable ice resist is Primarina and in a pinch Magmar. But anytime you see something like Celesteela, like I almost brought this up earlier, I mentioned I love the teams that have a flying steel groundwater backbone, but the problem with those is that you're ice weak immediately, or at least you don't have a great check.
Oh
Um,
yeah, you need to go out elsewhere to find those. It's like
right.
it's dependent on your fire type.
Exactly. And here the
And
fire type is 1 point. Not to say that it can't
mm,
come, but like you look at those top six and you want those to come every week.
mhm.
You don't want to have to bring your 1 point to a random match. I'm not an Eldegoss fan, but I'm not going to complain about it. That's just, they needed removal because their flying type doesn't have defog. and I understand that. The only other thing that I had like a bit of an issue with on this team, because it breaks incredibly well, it's incredibly threatening. I wish there was like a few more options, or at least one more option to get in Zam. I think like offensively you can get in Zam with Zera, but not all the time, and you can probably do it with Noivern with some success. But I would like to see like a slow, bulky pivot. Like I would love, obviously, not exactly on this build, but something like Mandibuzz getting in Zam is like, really useful.
That'd be great.
Something that's like a slow pivot would be awesome. But I don't think it's super necessary. I mean, I think in a lot of cases, Zam can just come in after something goes down, or even come in as a lead and just break early for this team. And I have a lot of good things to say about this team. I totally agree with where it's placed at 3 here.
Yeah. All right. So shall we continue then?
Let's do it. And we have. Sorry, do you want to take this one? Stuck in my throat.
Oh yeah. So the number 2 team is the Kennesaw State Rowlets, I believe. Is that what?
Yeah.
I know Nadia has gone through a couple different iterations of the team name.
This logo is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the branding for sure. Oh man, I like this team a lot. Like,
oh yeah.
I think it was really funny to me when Deoxys Speed went in like early first round in this draft, and someone I don't entirely remember who, but someone was like, "Is Deoxys Speed even good?" And it was just like
why did you unban it if you didn't?
Yeah, is like, was it? Wait, was it Dilly who said that?
I don't know who said it. But I think a lot of people ask themselves the question, because I think a lot of people just genuinely don't have experience with this mode.
Well, it's fairly recent that it started kind of becoming unbanned. I think I saw it in a couple spaces, and kind of going back into like earlier this year, where people were kind of exploring it a little bit as they're exploring other like kind of new things that are like traditionally considered Ubers, but maybe not entirely broken in standard. But yeah, the thing is, Deoxys Speed is kind of neat, and I think that a lot of people look at it and they're aware of kind of its role on ladder as primarily like a sash lead, or it taunts fast and then it sets spikes and then it dies. Truth be told, it's a phenomenal mon in draft for the same reason that like you see something like Necrozma be tiered much lower than OU in Gen 7. Versatile psychic types are a phenomenal pick in draft.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so you talk about like Deoxys Speed, it like people look at it and they're like, oh, it's not bulky, it's got like 50 hit points and like was it like base 80s or base 90 defenses, and like what people don't realize when you say that is that like
all bulk.
You run all.
What is
yeah,
it? What is it? At zero speed investment, it outspeeds 130s, fully invested.
Yeah. Frequently, you will have to run basically no speed, which means that you will be able to run all bulk and a plus special attack nature, if you so choose. And the other thing that people don't realize is like people aren't always aware of the math that goes into like the back of like stats.
Yep.
And but like a comparison is that like Deoxys Speed has the same base hit points as the Rotom forms, and that's not to say that it's a 50. Good base hit points. It's to say that just because you have base 50 hit points doesn't mean that you keel over to a single neutral hit.
Well, and something that's really important to note about that, because we talk about mons with base 50 all the time, probably don't think about it. Dio Speed is a relatively new one, but like you said, the Rotom forms and Mega Diancie, which is a powerful mon, and generally you leave it unmega to take a hit, and you mega it when you want to start, plowing through teams with that coverage, but it can still eat a hit, and when it gets that +2 from Diamond Storm, it can definitely eat a hit. And something that's really, really important to mention about lower HP Pokemon is, generally speaking, it's better to run to invest in HP than to invest in one of the individual defenses. I think we all know that. But like if you run the math on stat investment, it's always better to invest in the lower of HP or the lower of defenses. Like technically speaking, if you know what hit you're taking, it's better to invest in the lower base stat. So lower base HP is not really the end of the world because you're going to be investing in HP anyway. It's not nearly as bad as something like we were talking about Doublade earlier, which has really
Yeah.
high base defense but really high special defense, which means what are you going to do? Are you going to invest in
Yeah.
HP or are you going to invest in special defense and patch that up? You know?
hmm Yeah, it has both low HP and low special defense, if I recall correctly.
Exactly. Yep.
So
It does.
yeah, and yeah, so all of that discussion about Deoxys speed, like there's other things where, like for instance, like if you operate it similar to Mew in terms of like running taunt and hazards and things, which you can do in draft, or even like taunt calm mind type sets, things like that. One of the Clutch brought this up to me the other day, is that one of the weaknesses of Mew is that it's not always faster than the thing that it wants to taunt, and
Right.
Deoxys speed will never have that problem,
Right.
ever. And so yeah, it's a phenomenal pick. Nasty plot sets have a lot of validity to them. It's got all the coverage in the world. Calm mind sets are particularly scary. Access to calm mind and recover, and just being faster than anything and being able to calm mind in front of just about anything.
Right.
Because of that, like that's scary. I think we were like looking at calcs the other day where like Scarf Pult can't even like 2-hit KO a Deoxys at +1, like stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
if it's like built even just like with max HP and some SPDF investment. So anyways, we've talked all about that one Mon for a little while, but the rest of the team I think rounds out really cool. It
Yeah.
starts off with Deoxys Speed, Tapu Koko, Keldeo, like three pretty fast things, and then immediately jumps into this like really nice like set of Tangrowth, Mandibuzz, Steelix.
Yep.
That's like to me like that's just like I'm really a sucker for these like Clutch, and I refer to them as like 3-and-3 type builds where it's like
Mm-hmm.
you have three offensive pieces and three like kind of more like backbone defensive type pieces.
Right.
So this team lends itself really naturally to builds like that. And then the budget picks we are just like
I
I
mean, they're
think all
hardly
very
they're
very good.
hardly
Yeah.
budgets, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, Druddigon, I think is always a budget pick that I get behind.
Yeah.
Glare is a great move.
Right.
And Glare on something like Druddigon is like very spammable. It gets rocks up. You like frequently when checking something like, imagine checking something like a Rillaboom, you could throw on a Rocky helmet and
Yep.
run Rough Skin and just take a third of its health off every time it wants to click a move.
Absolutely.
Scorch, another phenomenal budget mon in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Patches up like a lot for the team. Like you look at Tangrowth, Mandibuzz, Licks. Like a common worry for that would be like what there is going to take an Ice Beam.
Right.
Is Keldeo going to do it consistently? You'd rather it not. So here's Scorch. Rest Talk sets with Scorch are very cool. Fire Lash is obviously a really cool move. It's one of the it's got knockoff as an option. It's got leech life as an option. Just phenomenal all around Pokemon. And then Garbodor and Ursaring also just fantastic budget picks. And that gets us down like the full list of things. Like it's I think that this team is so neat, and I think it's like a really cool team to put around Deoxys speed as well. Like it's just like it's a very strong balanced team, and all of that like. By the way, all of that discussion happens without mentioning Silvally, which is not really a budget pick, but
Right.
honestly, sleeper like I hated Silvally in Gen 7, and I have recently seen the light. Like base 120 multi attack and any type that you want,
Right.
that's crazy.
That is
That's
crazy.
so cool.
It's crazy
Like,
too when you can do. I believe it has access to flame charge, and so
mhm,
it can do a little bit of mind games, and it can overcome some of its checks, and obviously just
mhm,
the adaptability. Like Silvally can be anything you need it to be on a given week. If you're like, oh shoot, I'm weak to Zygarde. Well, okay. I mean, this
mhm,
team wouldn't be, but you could run a Grass Silvally if you really need to, or even a Bug one.
mhm.
There's
Yeah.
so many options with Silvally.
Mhm.
I sorry if you got some final thoughts about the
I was
team.
gonna I was gonna throw in on there on Silvally though. The one thing that's like I like it on teams like this where like the backbone's pretty well established defensively. So like because sometimes people draft Silvally and they're like, oh, I don't have a dark, so Silvally is just gonna be my dark when I need it to be.
Yeah, I don't
And
like
it's
that.
like, no, I don't like that either. The cool thing is when you get to look at your opponent's team and say, all right, is there a type that completely just wrecks them? Are there normal resistance garbage? Great. I'm running Silk Scarf, Swords Dance, Flame Charge, multi attack. Let's
Right.
go. Like, are their ghost resists bad? Here's the Silvally Ghost. I don't need to rely on this defensively. Therefore, I can run something that gets a spammable stab base 120 move.
Right.
Like, that's so good.
With what is it,
People
95
that
base
95
speed?
attack, 95 base speed, 95 base attack,
Which is
95
good,
across the
like
board.
especially for a
Yeah.
13-point mon that can do that in any type.
Mhm.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that like people see like 95 attack and they are like, oh, that's not that good. But then what they don't realize is weaker attacking mons have always gotten by offensively if they have more powerful moves to make up for it.
Yep.
Victini is an insane breaker.
Well, look at the
For
converse
instance.
of that. We talked earlier about Salamence. Salamence is great. I mean, obviously there's been power creep, but what is it, like 135 attack or
Oh.
something? That's really really good. But then you look at the moves that it's normally clicking. If you're not comfortable with clicking Outrage, it's Dragon Claw and Dual Wing Beat. And the problem that we often have with Salamence is that it's not getting the rolls it needs to get kills. And so the converse,
Mhm.
you crazy high attack, but it's not getting the output you want. If you've got serviceable attack like 95, but you've got a base 120 move coming off of that, it's getting the rolls it needs most of the time. you know,
Yeah.
so yeah, so I'll give a few thoughts about this team. Obviously, you're closer to it because I believe you helped draft it, but you guys did a
Oh, don't
fantastic job.
don't say that. I'm gonna be accused of rigging the power rankings.
No. Yeah,
I had
well,
some input, but I will say that I just kind of like looked at picks that were suggested to me by the front office of Nadia and was like, yeah, those are okay. So this is
no,
not
yeah.
my I cannot take credit for this team. That was
Yeah, of course. No, I'm
yeah.
not at all suggesting that you drafted it. I'm suggesting that you've been thinking about it for probably a week, and talking it out with Nadia, who's of course making the picks. But the thing that I love about what she did up top is Dio and Tapu Koko for me are just like I would love to use those two together.
Mhm.
Having an offensive psychic type that's really versatile is not always easy to do, and so you really do have to like find fighting resistances where you can get them. I
Mhm.
think this team probably could have benefited from like a bulkier fairy or something, but for me, with my
Mhm.
playstyle, I would prefer something like Tapu Koko, where you're going,
Mhm.
okay, I'm going to bring a fighting type here because I'm not seeing a lot of fighting resistance. Garbodor is not going to be always doing it. Bandabuzz is taking it neutrally. And then you bring your fighting type, and the top two mons on the roster are Dio Speed and Tapu Koko. They're going to destroy that fighting type. So I like that sort of that way of playing. That's just kind of the way that
Mhm.
my playstyle runs. I love Keldeo. I will always love Keldeo. I think it's an
Mhm.
unbelievable mon in draft. I agree with you. This 3-and-3 offensive and then defensive backbone thing is absolutely the kind of thing that
Mhm.
I really like to
Yeah.
see and that scares me in a
Mhm.
draft. Um, so
And I will say like a quick note as well, like
yeah,
the thing that I like about Deoxyspeed and Tapu Koko is that on their own, like, but if either of those, like, in isolation, were the fighting resist, and granted, there's a Garbodor in the back as well that
right.
can kind of function in that role, but like, uh, if either of those in isolation were the fighting resist, I'd be worried. But you have two things that are like they're not super bulky, they're not super fat. The Deoxyspeed is not Mew. Like it has the versatility, but it's not.
Right.
Coco, like the cool thing about those is that like you have two things that have very consistent recovery. And
Mm-hmm.
so like they don't mind taking a close combat. And the fact that
Exactly.
there's and whereas like I made the comment earlier before, like two so-so fairies do not add together into a good fairy.
Yep.
Two decent fighting resists can add together to make it so that your team's fighting weakness is much better covered,
A
you
hundred
know,
percent agree with that.
especially when they both
Especially
have recovery.
especially when they both
And
have recovery, and for me, especially when they're the two most potent Pokemon on the team. Because
yes.
you're not just checking fighting types defensively with them in a combined fashion.
Mhm.
You're also offensively checking them, and in most cases, I think pretty much every case, you're not going to have a fighting type that's outpacing either or both of them and doing much. So you have to get that hit off. um, and with a defensive backbone, like Tangrowth can take hits. I mean, it doesn't have to be a resisted hit.
Mm-hmm.
Mandibuzz can take hits. It doesn't have to be a resisted hit. So, yeah, no, this is a fantastic team. I think Keldeo Coco has always been something that I enjoy personally. I think they lure things really, really well for this Dio speed to like get in on something scared out by Coco or Keldeo and have a free turn to click buttons because it's going to be guaranteed faster than whatever is lured in. Um, and I think like Tangrowth, Mandibuzz, Steelix just has a good way of wearing down opponents, so Dio Speed can finish the job.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So let's
All right.
move on to number one, and it's so weird seeing this acronym and it not being one of your teams. Um,
Oh,
so Seattle Smeargles, and this is S2. So
yeah.
I'm happy to start on this one.
Go right for it.
So I'll just name them off: Mega Gallade, Hydreigon, Nihilego, Swampert, Darmanitan, Whimsicott, Registeel, Avalugg, Uxie, Thundi T, and Porygon. The first thing that I notice about this team is that every Mon is serviceable. Some of them are a little more niche, but pretty much every Mon can come to most games. It's a very broad um, roster. Like it's not
Yeah.
super top heavy. There's definitely a lot of mid tiers, but all of those mid tiers work well enough together.
Yeah.
There's things off the ground. There's removal where they need it. There's setters where they need it. There's physical threats. There's special threats. There's setup options on both sides. There's good Scarf users. Swampert is a mon that has gotten a lot of traction in this gen and for good reason. I think Nihilego is always terrifying to face.
Yes.
And I think the way that it pressures steel types is really, really nice for like Hydreigon in the back or the other way around. Hydreigon often lures in a steel type, and if that steel type, I mean, it's got like what Fire Blast and Earth. It's got Earth Power, right? So it's does Hydreigon have Earth Power? Yeah, it does.
It does.
So
It does.
I've drafted Hydreigon like 6 times, and I still don't know that. Obviously Hydreigon is generally going to be luring in fairies, but then it can U-turn into Nihilego, which is very useful. And to the extent that your fairy is not very bulky and you're using like a Shuka Berry steel type to check Hydreigon and hoping it doesn't pack Fire Blast for your team, like it's going to do a lot of damage with like a Specs Pulse or something, and then Nihilego is going to clean up. I love those two together. The type synergy, the offensive synergy, super
Mm-hmm.
cool. Obviously, any team with Mega Gallade is going to do really well, and Lade with Hydreigon is always well known as a good combination. I think
Mm-hmm.
Darm is terrifying on any team.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest problem that I had with like the beginning of this draft is the relative ice weakness, and that was patched up pretty well with Registeel and then Avalugg. Normally, I don't love Avalugg, but I do like it as an ice resist. And I think that it's probably significantly more usable with boots, and it does have recovery. So,
It does. Yeah.
it can be a nice backbone piece. Uxie's a mon that I won a championship with Uxie, like literally my first league way back when, and I had no idea what I was doing with it. I used it, I brought it a lot, but I feel like I pretty much like I ran helmet, like that's basically
Mm-hmm.
it. I had a lot of trouble with Uxie, but I do want to see and like to see it used well. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on it, but and then Thundi T is like you look at the top few and you're already scared by like the top 3 offensively, and then you find the Thundi T second to last.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very good. And this is mascot pick for me this season. I love Porygon. I was calcing
Yeah.
earlier with ACAT, and we were just like looking at random matchups for Porygon, and he asked me if Porygon can check a Zygarde. And it surprisingly can do it pretty well.
Yeah.
It can literally take, I think it was like, the roll was like, if you're like max defense on an offensive Zygarde, you take like 34 max from an arrows, and you take like 42 max from a +1, and Ice Beam kills if you're max but modest. it's like it's a weird mon that can actually do stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, it has like it's a bulky normal type for like your Spectrier like Gengar matchup or whatever. But it's got teleport, which is fun. I think it's like a 1 point mon that actually can come to matches, which is great.
Yeah. I'd say it's one Pokemon that forces prep. Yeah.
Forces prep is absolutely true. And I think I think there's a few mons on this roster that like personally are not for me. Registeel's not for me. Whimsicott's not for me. But I think they fit here really well.
Yeah. That was kind of the thing is like, because these are, the rankings here are our rankings.
Yeah.
It's like I get to decide in part what I think is good and what I think is not.
Right.
And part of the reason that the top two teams are the top two teams is because I actually like all of the budget picks on them.
Yep.
And like even for a lot of the other teams, like I'd say that there are teams that are good and we can have differences of opinion. But again, my rankings, so I get to say what goes first. And here's a team that, in my opinion, all of the picks fit really well together.
Yeah.
And I think I would only add to your discussion of it by saying like, obviously like a well-built Mega Glade team is always going to be good. Yeah, I really love Hydreigon and Nihilego together. On your comment about Uxie, I think Uxie is just a phenomenal psychic type. It's to me, it's almost like a mon that was made with like the draft needs of psychics in mind, in my opinion.
I get
What I
that.
mean by that is like it's bulky, it sets rocks, it's not passive. It has like, it has foul play as an option. It has psychic stab as an option that like doesn't hit hard but keeps it from being like fodder
No
for,
subs. Yeah.
subs. It has Thunderwave, Toxic, those is like really, really common options for keeping things from really taking advantage of it. So like it's not, it's never been an offensive threat. Like I think that maybe somebody's out there like arguing that there's some kind of like curse set or something that just like 6-0s.
I used
But
what was it? It wasn't a setup set, but it was like a Figgy recycle toxic stall set that season that I had it, and it was crazy. It was actually surprisingly good with that. Yeah, no, I mean it's not an offensive piece, but it definitely does the job. The reason why I felt like and made that comment that I felt like I always misused it is because I feel like there is opportunity with Uxie that is relatively untapped that I just like I didn't tap into at all. I just
maybe.
used it as a bulky psychic pivot that could do some tech stuff and make sure that subs didn't go up on it. And I guess that's its role, but I just feel like there's so much coverage there, and there's so much tech on that mon that like there's got to be some kind of set that is hidden in there,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if you don't have any more comments on this, I mean this is our number one team here. We are going to, I guess, round out this video with any final thoughts, Sam, that you have on your end.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this is the part where I say at the end, as well as like saying something similar at the beginning, that like my judgments of your teams are not final or or personal or anything.
Of course.
It's I didn't say that something was bad because I hate you. That's completely independent for the most part. Sorry, that's mean, but like I think that it's always a thing where PRs are for fun. PRs are for discussing what we think works well, what we think won't. That doesn't mean that teams that are ranked poorly are bad objectively, because there's just nothing objective in this game and in this format at this point. Like, there are top players drafting really weird teams and winning with them.
Right.
There are players who are new to the scene drafting really, really great teams. Like, it's hard to like really rank anything or to make any judgments for sure about how well a team will do.
I think it's important to note that power rankings are not a prediction of success generally. They're a ranking of what we think are the worst to best teams synergistically that have the opportunity for success, but it very much depends on things like play style, experience, of the
Hmm.
coach, whether they're a veteran or whether they're relatively new. Like you said, there are new coaches who draft incredible teams and do nothing with them because they're still learning. That's fine. Better
Yeah.
to draft a good team and learn with it that way.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the power rankings are absolutely not predictive in any sense. They're intended solely to learn about what works and what doesn't work and what might give you.
Hmm.
I guess the best way to put it is the top ranked teams in power rankings generally are not going to have as difficult of a time in prep. People will have harder time in prep against them, and they will maybe have to play a little bit less aggressively at the start of a match just because they might have a favorable matchup just based on composition.
Sure. But it's Mons. Anyone can beat anyone, and sometimes like matchups against with a good team versus a bad team. Sometimes the bad team has one thing that just completely throws something off. We're
Yep.
talking about like some of the teams that we ranked low. I kind of talked about how certain Mons were like matchup fishy.
Yep.
Looking for like a matchup that they'll win, um, and that could very well happen.
Absolutely.
But yeah, if you have any problem with the rankings, what you should do is you should look up on Discord a guy by the name of Clutch sometimes. He's in the PCL Discord, and you should write him a private
Strongly
message on
worded. Yeah.
Discord, and you should tell him that you are unhappy with the way that the PCL PRs shook out. If you message me, I can send you the exact format that I want you to send him a message with.
Right. It's very
Um,
important because generally speaking,
hmm,
Clutch sometimes he's a very busy fellow. He usually won't read a DM if it's less than like 4 paragraphs. And so
yeah.
if you have something to say, you'll want to really make it wordy.
Uh, and if you didn't like if you really didn't like the PRs, write him very strongly. Keep in mind, maybe not too strong. It is his birthday, the day that we're releasing this.
Yeah.
So
Happy birthday, Clutch.
yeah, happy birthday. So.
Well, with that, I think we can round this out. I hope everyone enjoyed our little analysis here, and keep an eye out for a similar video analyzing the Origins draft for Season 11. Thanks, everyone.